Hey you guys, it's me Purcell, and this is part 2 of my third and final book haul for the year, and I'm very excited about everything, but there is a lot. So as in the last video, I have some notes for myself for things to remember to say at the beginning of this video, and so because I had so many books, I separated them into 2 categories. And so in the last video, which I will link below, I had the middle grade book that I bought along with the picture books, the graphic novels, and the YA books. And in this book haul, I have the adult, nonfiction, and poetry books. And I also have some ebooks, and so I will go through those ebooks. And so I have a combination of ebooks and used and new physical books. And all the books that I bought came from either Amazon, eBay, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository. I have a Kobo ebook, and then I had a Chirp audiobook that I talked about in the last book haul. So yeah, we have a lot of books to get through, so let's get started. And the first book is Pompeii, The Living City, and this is by Alex Butterworth and Ray Lawrence. I'm talking about this book first because I actually forgot about this book. And when I started this video, I was like, I don't have Pompeii up here. So, this was one of the used books. So I think, given the topic of this book, that there's a little bit, of like wear on the book that I think actually like serves the topic of this book pretty well. So this is a book about Pompeii, and I've been wanting the book about Pompeii, and so I was really excited that I could get a good price on the used copy because they were selling the new one for $25, and I was like, no. And like I like to do, I'm going to take the jackets off of all the books so you can see what the naked hardcovers look like. And so again, I think this wear, like normally I would be like, oh no, there's a spot on my book. But again, given the topic, I think this gives this book a better charm. And so that is what the spine looks like. And that is our first book, Pompeii. So the next 2 books I got are mass market paperbacks, and the first one is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, and this is a high fantasy book. And so I hear a lot about Brandon Sanderson with the Bookish videos that I watch, and he writes a lot of like really thick books, and they're like long series, and that just sounds exhausting. But this one channel, Elliot Books, she talks a lot about Brandon Sanderson. And every time she does a book recommendation video, she talks about Warbreaker. And it sounds interesting. I think it's like there's these 2 sisters, and one of them, she has been preparing her whole life to marry, I think, this king. And so the other sister has had all this freedom. She's got to do whatever she wants. But when the time comes to marry the older sister off, long story short, the younger sister is sent in her place, and so she's now, been thrust into this position, and she has no idea what to do because she's had all this freedom all her life, and now all this freedom has been taken away. And the other sister, who has been preparing her whole life to be queen, she now has all this freedom, and so she wants to go and save her sister. And I don't know how the magic system works in this, but I'm like, if I'm going to try a Brandon Sanderson book, it's going to be a relatively shorter one, and it's going to be a standalone. And they're saying he might add on to it, but right now it's a standalone. And yes, I'm like, I was sold at Brandon Sanderson wrote a standalone. And the next mass market paper book I got is Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. And basically I picked up this book because somebody was like, did you know that George R.R. Martin wrote a vampire book? And I was like, hey, if I'm ever going to read a George R.R. Martin book, I'm reading like the graphic novel adaptations of a Game of Thrones, but I don't know if I'll actually ever get to a Game of Thrones. So I was like, but I will get to this vampire book. So I know nothing about this book. So there's this guy, and he's on a boat, and there's like a vampire on the boat. And it sounds very like old school vampire novel, like circa back when I used to read a lot of Anne Rice books. So I'm excited about this. So these next books I'm going to talk about are my poetry books, and the first 2 are by the same author, and the first one is The Sweetest Kind of Poison by Katie Weismer, and then I also picked up Poems for the End of the World by Katie Weismer, and she is a YouTuber. I'm pretty sure she's an author YouTuber, but yes, she wrote some books. She also has, I think, like a contemporary book I think it's contemporary YA. I picked up her poetry books. And they both sound like they're kind of like darker, emotional kind of poetry, which is exactly the kind of poetry that I like. So I picked up both her poetry books. And I really like poetry that's, you know, formatted like I'm used to poetry being formatted. So I'm looking forward to reading these. And the next poetry book I picked up is Shout by Laurie Halse Anderson. And she is the author of the book, the audiobook I talked about in my last book haul, Speak. And so this is about her like story about like when she was raped and learning to speak up and tell her story. And I love poetry, and I like poetry that handles like heavy themes. So I picked this up, and this is kind of what the poetry books look like and how they're formatted. So in case you're curious. And also, yes, hardcover. And so we have some leaves, like a tree with some leaves that kind of looks like the cover, and then our pretty spine. The next poetry book I picked up is The Dark Between Stars by Atticus. And I don't know what kind of themes these poems are going to tackle, but it sounds like it's beautiful, and this poetry book has been on my radar for a while just based off of the cover. And I actually saw this when I was walking through Books A Million, and so I picked it up, and this is kind of what's going on here. So yeah. And the last poetry book I picked up is Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass by Lana Del Rey. And if you don't know, Lana Del Rey is a musician of kind of somber alternative music, and I do like her music. So I was really curious about like what her poetry book would look like. And so this is what the book looks like without the jacket. It looks exactly like the other book. So that's always nice. And then we have our end paper. So I thought it was really interesting the way this book was formatted, because they took like actual like typed pages like from a typewriter and like scanned them and put them into this book. And so we have a lot of poetry that's interspersed with these pictures, and most of the pictures were taken by Lana Del Rey. There's like a thing in the back that says which pictures that she took and which pictures came from somewhere else, but she did take most of them, so she took these. So one of the really interesting things about this book is because they took like actual pages that like actual typewriter pages, you have pages like this that have like notes and have like little editing notes on them. And like this in particular, it's like you have the original poem, and then you have like she has some notes, and then like she retyped it with the changes, and then you have like pages like this that look like she spilled water on them or cried on them. And I thought that added like an extra layer of like, it's kind of like part of the art, you know, that's a poetry book. It just added something extra to the poetry book that I thought was really interesting. And there's also like other poems in here where she's like written and like made changes, and like she realized like she didn't spell a word right, or she left out, you know, like an apostrophe and a contraction, and she would like put it in there. So I don't know, I thought it was really interesting. And yeah. So the next book I have is The Vine Witch by Luanne G. Smith. And I came across this book on Goodreads, and I thought the cover was really pretty. So obviously I'm largely a cover buyer and drawn to beautiful covers, which I think is very obvious and going to become increasingly more obvious as I go through these books. And this is like fantasy book, and I don't know if there's going to be more books like this book, because it sounds like that there are a lot of like different kinds of witches in this world, and so I don't know if we're going to have companion books that talks about the other witches. But anyway, in this book, it's about this woman named Elena who is a vine witch, and her family used to run this vineyard, and they used their powers to like help it thrive, but there was some kind of curse, and so now she's like struggling to get back on her feet, and she's also like trying to hide like her abilities, and so now the vineyard is owned by this guy, and so she's working at this vineyard that she was supposed to inherit, and she's helping it thrive with her vine powers, or trying to hide them from the current vineyard owner at the same time. And this is kind of short, and it sounds like it's really good, so I picked it up. So these next 3 books, I also picked up while I was wandering through Books A Million, and I saw these covers, and I was like, these look super fun. And so we have Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White, and Cinderella. And I don't really know that much about the plot or anything, but I really like retellings, and they're really short, and they sounded interesting, so I picked these up. And speaking of fairy tale retellings, I picked up Cursed, which is an anthology, and it features stories from Christina Henry and Neil Gaiman. And this is an anthology of like dark twist on folk tales and fairy tales and curses and things of that nature. And it sounds like it's right up my alley, so I picked this up. The next book I picked up is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, and I haven't read any of her books before, but I decided that I was going to read this one because it sounded interesting. And I think this book came out earlier this year, and it's like an urban fantasy, and it's about this woman, and they're like some demons, and they kill some people that she cares about, and that is all I know. Oh my gosh, this end paper is gorgeous. I don't know if I knew it looked like that. That is nice. Then we have our naked hardcover with the moon and the pretty spine. And yeah. But yeah, I don't know a lot about this book, but what I do know makes the book sound interesting. Actually, I think the title of the book is House of Earth and Blood, and Crescent City is like the series name. But anyway, yeah, sounds like fun. So kind of in the same vein as the last book, I don't normally buy books that are like super hyped and super popular, but I did really want to read this book when I heard the description for it, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Swab. And yeah, this is about this woman who makes what they call a Faustian bargain, which is basically a deal with the devil. So in exchange for immortality, everyone she meets will forget her, and then one day someone remembers her, and that's the concept for this book, which if you watch a lot of videos on BookTube, you probably heard much better summaries of this book. But it sounds really interesting, and so I haven't read any of her books yet, but I thought this would be a good one to start with, since it sounds like something I would really enjoy. Oh, that's pretty. I haven't looked at a lot of these books like in detail yet, so that's what the end paper looks like. I wasn't really into end paper until I started seeing books that had like really nice end paper like this. And then we have like some birds on the book, and then our spine. So yeah. So the next book I got is The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood, and I had a story idea once upon a time that was kind of similar to the concept of this book. So when I saw this book, I was like, that sounds fantastic. And so the tagline is Priestess, Assassin, Traitor. And so it's about this woman, and she's been raised to be a human sacrifice. And like on the day she's supposed to be sacrificed, like, I don't know if someone saves her or what happens, but someone saves her, and so she goes on a journey with that person, and like, you know, becomes his assassin. Anyway, it sounds like it's really fun. I went back and forth on this book, like a lot of books in my last book haul and like some other books in this book haul. I went back and forth on this book for a while, But like I said in the last book haul, since I was buying everything, I decided to go ahead and pick up everything that I was interested in. And that's what this book looks like under the jacket. Classy and simple. So also in the last video, I mentioned how, yes, I am super excited about everything I bought, or I would not have bought the book, but there are some books that I'm like extra excited about, and this next book is one of those books. And I wasn't going to get this, but I kept looking at it and I just could not help myself, and that is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. And I did not read Aragon, so I'm not familiar with his writing. But this book sounds really, really good, and I've been wanting to read more sci-fi, and what better than to pick up a book by someone whose writing I trust, even though I've never read any of his books. And also this cover, I don't know if you can tell, but like there's like this sheen on this cover that is just like entrancing. So yeah. Also, she's kind of a thick book. And all I know is this has aliens in it. So it says, space holds countless secrets. She just found the deadliest one. And it sounds dark and maybe a little creepy and super fun. So I picked this up and super excited about it. And this is on my December TBR. So I'm hoping to get this book read by the end of the year. And I'm very, very excited about it. And the reviews that I was skimming, like people were saying that, yeah, it's like a little, like, you know, it's like a little slower at the beginning, but that it was so worth it. It was so good. So I'm super excited about this book. Also, I almost forgot, we have our in paper. Oh, that's nice. And we have the symbol. Beautiful, beautiful blue. This is like the best shade of blue. And then our gorgeous spine. And the next book I picked up is The Witcher, The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. And so these are the prequel short stories that lead into the Witcher series. And so it's recommended that you read these first because these have all the background information for all the characters that are in The Witcher. And after watching the TV show, which I think the first season is based off of this, so yeah, after watching the first season of the TV show and being a little confused, but also being really intrigued, I really want more information about the characters, especially Yennefer, obviously. And so I picked this up because I want more information. And then I want to rewatch season 1 and see if, you know, I'm less confused. So I forgot to say, but as I mentioned in the last video, in order to split the books up into as equal piles as I could, I decided to separate them by category. And so I got these categories based on how the publishers have the books listed. Like in the last video, I forgot to talk about the ebooks. So I'm going to talk about them here before I forget again. And I have them off to the side, so I'm going to look off to the side. And so the first ebook in this category that I picked up is The Fairy Reel. It's an anthology, and it features stories by Neil Gaiman, Gregory Mcguire, Holly Black, and more. And it's an anthology of fairy stories. So I don't know if it's dark or if they're like lighter, fluffier kind of stories or more whimsical kind of stories. But I saw this attached to Gregory Mcguire. And so since I was buying a couple of his other books, I decided to pick this up because it looked really interesting. And then the next ebook I picked up is Blazing Justice by Thea Landon, and this is a choose your own romance, and it's a short book. I think it's about 70 pages, and there are 3 endings. There are 3 basic storylines you can choose from, and so it's kind of like it opens up with like this grisly murder, which I thought was a little grisly for the kind of the tone of the rest of the book, which is kind of light and fun. But basically you're choosing like who she's going to hook up with, if she's going to hook up with the detective, her boss, or the murder suspect. And it was super fun. I read this book, I think a month ago now. And then the next ebook I picked up is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. And I think this is like a historical horror book. This woman marries this guy and then he dies and she's pregnant and she's left in this large estate, and there's this room that when she finally goes into the room, there's like this mannequin or something that looks just like her, and apparently this is like super creepy. This is a book that I've been super on the fence about. I think it's been on my Goodreads TBR for like at least 5 years. I don't know when this book came out, but it's been on my TBR for a while. And so I finally decided to pick it up because it sounds like fun and creepy and dark and maybe something I would rather read during the day, but we'll see. And then the next ebook I picked up is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. And this is about this woman who had a very inappropriate relationship with one of her teachers in high school. And she remembers it as being like super romantic and she's so special. And as an adult, there's a student that accuses a guy of being super inappropriate. And I think the student reaches out to her for support. And so now she's forced to confront what really happened. Like, was it really romantic or was this guy a predator? And I mean, obviously he was a predator. And so in that same vein, I got Becoming Lolita by Allison Wood, and this is actually a memoir that is tackling the same subject as My Dark Vanessa, only this is nonfiction, and it's about this girl. She had a very inappropriate relationship with her high school English teacher that she went for a while thinking was super romantic, and then she realized later that the guy was a predator. And so I picked this book up because Amazon recommended it to me, probably because I bought My Dark Vanessa. And so I want to read these books kind of close together because they are so similar. So I can see like kind of the differences and the similarities between the fiction version and the memoir version. And then the last ebook I picked up is Bunny by Mona Awad, and I am currently reading this book. And I'm about a third of the way through as of the filming of this video. And if I finish the book by the time this video goes up, I'll put a little note here saying what I thought. But right now, this book is so weird and it is so trippy, and I'm really, really loving it. And this is actually the last book that I bought. And so it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland-esque story about this woman who's in this MFA graduate program at kind of like this elite like art university. And her classmates are all in this group that she calls the bunnies because they call each other bunnies. And so she gets an invitation to Smut Salon, which is where they just like hang out, and she goes there, and I'm pretty sure they're drugging her, and it is so good so far. It's really, really dark. I think this is classified as like horror, so it is getting really, really weird. And like in the best way, like in a way that I just absolutely love. These people are like, it's so weird. So back to the physical books. The next book I have is Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder. And this is another book I feel like has been on my TBR for a very long time that I kept going back and forth about, and I finally decided to just pick it up. And this is about this woman. She kills someone, and they give her a choice between execution or becoming a poison taster for the commander. And so she just chooses to be the poison taster. So yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. And then next I have The Sisters Grimm by Mina van Praag. And I picked up this book because people were talking about like there's like so many point of views, and I normally do not like books that have a lot of point of views, but it sounds like it sounds really interesting, and it sounds like because there are so many point of views that the pacing is like really good because it switches point of views like pretty often. and people were saying that like it was hard to read, and I don't know, I'm like, it sounds like a challenge, and I feel like I'm up for the challenge. I don't know. So I picked this book up, and it's about these 4 sisters, and apparently their dad is like a demon, and so he has all of these children, and at the end, like each chapter is like counting down to like this big event, and at the event, the sisters are going to be pitted against their half-brothers, and they're going to fight to the death, and whoever wins, like, they have to embrace the dark side or he's going to kill them. And I don't know how many point of views are in this, but I feel like there's probably at least 7. And yeah, it sounds really good though. And this is what our naked book looks like. There's like a little thing here that says MVP for Mina Van Praag. And then our spine. The next book I picked up is The Deep by Amakatsu. And this is like, I think, like a ghost story involving someone who was a survivor of the Titanic, and now she's working on the Britannic, but there's still something like in the waters that's like haunting like her and like someone else who's on the ship who was a survivor, and they're saying that it has something to do with why the Titanic sank. It sounds really dark and really good. So I guess this is like a historical, like supernatural horror ghost story, and this is what our book looks like. AK for Amakatsu, and our spine. And also, yes, I was very drawn to this cover because it is just stunning, and I just love how, like, you know, it looks like there's sea foam, you know, on the letters. It's just really nice. And there's actually a funny story related to this book, which I'll talk about when I get to the book that's related to this book. So the next book I picked up is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendricks. And this book sounds like it's a lot of fun. It's like a murder mystery with vampires. So like a vampire moves into this suburban neighborhood like in the South, and like children start going missing, and so the book club like gets together and they're like, I think he's a vampire and I think we should like get rid of him. And it sounds like it's a lot of fun. Oh, I like that. So on our naked hardcover, we have this Town of Mount Pleasant Public Library, South Carolina stamp. That's a really nice touch. And then we have our spine. And yeah, it doesn't look like it's that long. Sounds like it's fun. So speaking of horror books, I picked up Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this is like a historical Gothic horror about this woman, and she gets a letter from her cousin that's like really, really erratic and crazy, saying that these people are trying to kill me, please help. And so she is sent to like this sprawling estate in the Mexican countryside. And so when she gets there, her cousin's like, never mind, I just have tuberculosis. But she decides to stay and investigate this English family that her cousin married into anyway. And I heard this book gets like kind of gross and like really creepy, like especially around the halfway mark. And I like really atmospheric books, and I did hear, this is a pretty short book too, I did hear that the first half of the book was like a little slow, but I don't usually mind if it's like atmospheric, and I really like the characters. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this book. And this is what it looks like. Classy red and shiny golden spine. So probably the most different book I have on this haul is this next one. And this is another book that when I was going to the checkout counter when I was in Books A Million, I saw this book and I was like, that is a very obnoxious and gorgeous shade of pink. And so I picked up this book, If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. So I feel like this book is about these people who live in this apartment complex, and I think like each one is jealous of like one of the other ones, but as we go through the book, I think we learn that like everyone has like something that they're dealing with and no one's life is perfect. I'm pretty sure this is like contemporary. And I don't read a lot of contemporary, especially not contemporaries that don't sound super dark. But I don't know. I really like this cover, and it sounds interesting, like when I read the summary of it. And so I decided to get this and do something a little different and read something completely different than what I would normally do. So, and then our jacketless book looks like this. Classy, black and gold. I feel like this is a missed opportunity to have like a pink book underneath the jacket. So this next book I want to show you, it's not really a book, it's like a journal. But when I was looking at Leigh Bardugo's books, I saw this and I was like, hello, what is that gorgeous purple thing? And this is a daily journal, and there are 365 pages, and there are prompts, and I've been interested in daily journaling lately. I do have another daily journal that I bought recently, but I just wanted to show you guys this one because it was like really pretty. So next we have some nonfiction books, and the first book is Witches by Rosalind Snyder, and this is a nonfiction about the Salem witch trials, and I think it's like a middle grade nonfiction, but it says the absolutely true tale of disaster in Salem, and I just could not help myself anytime somebody mentions Salem witch trials. And it is illustrated a little bit, so we have some pictures like this, and it just goes like through the story, and this is on my November TBR, so yeah. And then underneath the jacket we have an exact copy of the original book, so yeah. But I think this is just like a middle grade version, so like an easy or to digest version of Stacy Schiff's book called Witches, that's about the Salem witch trials. So I thought I'd read this one first and then I'd read that one later. So speaking of Stacy Schiff, the next nonfiction book I have is Cleopatra, A Life. And so this is about Cleopatra, and I heard this was freaking fantastic, and I'm very interested in reading more about Cleopatra, so I thought I would pick this book up. And then next I have A Magical World, Superstition and Science from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment by Derek K. Wilson. And I think this is about a history of like superstition in Europe, I think, and maybe colonial America. I'm not really sure. This book has been on my TBR for a while, and so I finally decided to pick it up. And this is what our book looks like underneath. Super classy, and yeah. So the last book I have is a cookbook, and that is Evolving Vegan by Mina Masood. And this is, I think that's how you say his name. And this is the guy who played Aladdin in the live action Aladdin. And yeah, this is mostly like recipes, I think, from his childhood that he veganized, and like some recipes from vegan places across, I think, Canada and the US. And so yeah, he went to restaurants and found some delicious things and put the recipes in here, and some of them have been adapted to be like more to have like ingredients that are like easier to get. And then he has some things, like I said, from his like childhood and like recipes that, you know, he loves. So I picked this up, and yeah. So back to fiction. The next two books I have are both by Christina Henry, and that is The Mermaid and Alice. So The Mermaid is about this mermaid, and she, as far as I can remember, she like she's saved by like, she gets caught in a net, I think, and this guy like saves her and lets her go. And so she like comes back later, and they like get married, and they have like this whole life, and then he dies. And so then like years later, I think it talks a little bit about P.T. Barnum, which I think is the guy that they talked about in the movie The Greatest Showman, which I still need to watch. And my sister tells me that I will really enjoy it. So yeah, I need to do that. And anyway, so he wants a mermaid, and I think it's based partly like on real life because P.T. Barnum was a real guy and that he was supposedly had a real mermaid in his exhibit. And so she is the real mermaid that's in his exhibit, and she only agrees to be in the exhibit if he agrees to let her go like whenever she wants. But he has no such plans of like keeping his end of the bargain. And I don't think this is like a thriller. I think it's just kind of a like softer, magical kind of story. Yeah. And then we have Alice, also by Christina Henry. And this is like a dark, like twisty, kind of horror-laced Alice in Wonderland retelling. And so basically this is about Alice, and she was in a mental institution. And so something happens and she breaks out, but like something like dark and sinister like breaks out with her, and it's like following her. And so she goes on this journey to like find out what really happened to her all those years ago, while there's something dark and creepy following her. Sounds really good. And this is a book that has been on my TBR for forever, and I finally decided to pick it up. Next, I have City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert, and this is about this older woman, and her niece comes to stay with her in New York. And so she tells her niece the story when she was younger, and about her life and experience and like the glitzy glamour of like this 1940s like theater world. And it sounds really interesting. So I guess this is like a contemporary / historical book, and not something I would normally read, but I was interested in this when it was first announced, so I decided to pick it up because it sounds really good and I've heard really good things about it. Speaking of books that are in a genre I don't normally read, I picked up You by Caroline Kepnes, and this is what the Netflix show was based off of, and so I have watched that already. And I do also know the differences between the books and the TV show, but it is pretty similar to the TV show. But I want to read the book version because I really like the TV show and it's super creepy, and I just really want to read this because I think it'll be really good. And this is about this guy who something happens in the past with his ex that has made him, you know, distrustful. And so he starts stalking this girl under the guise of, I'm just trying to make sure I can trust you and you're not going to break my heart like my ex. And it's from his point of view. So I'm looking forward to this because I don't normally read stuff like this, and it's really interesting. And obviously this guy is crazy. So another book that's a little outside of my normal comfort zone is Into the Drowning Deep by Mara Grant. And as far as I can tell, this is like a sci-fi horror with like some super creepy mermaids. And so the premise for this book is there's a crew, they're like legend hunters, and so they go on this mission to like see if mermaids are real, and they all disappear. And so like 7 years later, they send another crew out to the ship, and there's like some found footage, and they don't know if it's real or not. And there's one person, part of the modern day crew, whose sister went missing in the previous crew. So this book basically had me at Bloodthirsty Ariel. So yeah, there's some really creepy mermaids in a sci-fi setting, and a lot of science talk, and like a lot of I think maybe a little bit of nautical talk, and it sounds really, really good. So we're looking forward to this. The next book I have is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow, and this cover is so gorgeous. So I think this book is about this girl. She lives with this really wealthy guy. I don't think they're related. I think he's just like her guardian or something. And she finds this book, and I think the book is filled with portals, and that's all I know. And that's all I need to know. And also, I love the spine. Isn't it gorgeous? And it has deckled edges. And I'm sure I've mentioned before, but I really like deckled edges because it's just like really interesting. You know, like the extra texture of the book. It's interesting. It's interesting when they do this on paperbacks too. So the next 3 books I have are all by the same author, and the first one is A Wild Winter Swan by Gregory Mcguire, and this is the Goodreads giveaway book that I won. So finally won a Goodreads giveaway, and I mentioned this in my last book haul. I found out that I won, but I hadn't gotten the book yet, and so I finished this book about a week ago, and this is about a girl named Laura, and she's living with her grandparents in New York, and I want to say it's like the 30s or 40s. Could be the 50s or the 60s or the 70s. I have no idea. That doesn't really matter. But she was recently kicked out of school, and so her grandparents are wanting to send her to like this fancy, snooty finishing school in Montreal, and she really doesn't want to go. And so one night, while she's like packing up her stuff and like getting ready to go to Montreal because they're going to send her after Christmas, this boy with a wing for an arm crash lands on her roof, and so she's trying to hide him and, you know, like help him at the same time. And I did really like this book, but I have to say, like, not a lot happens, you know, because basically Gregory Mcguire took the folktale, like the fairy tale of The Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen, which is very similar to The Six Swans by the Grimm's brothers, except in Hans Christian Andersen's version, there are 11 Swan brothers. And basically, the last brother, like the brothers are cursed, and they like become swans, and they're only allowed to be boys for like, I don't know, I want to say like 1 hour or something a night, like before the sun comes up. And so their sister has to sew them like special sweaters, and she's not allowed to talk, and she only has so much time to do it. And so she doesn't have time to finish the youngest brother's shirt sleeve, and so he's left with a wing for an arm. And so Gregory Mcguire kind of took that story and was like, well, what happened with that other brother? Like, did he adjust? Like, how is he doing? And so he kind of merged that story with like Laura's like coming of age story. And so there's not a lot going on, but I really love Gregory Mcguire's writing because it's kind of weird, but it's also like really enchanting. But yeah, not a lot goes on. I think it took me a month to read this book, but I did like it. And then the next Gregory Mcguire book I got is After Alice, and I wanted the hardcover because I liked this version better, and somehow I got really lucky and I got a signed first edition, and I was like, I did not know it was signed when I got it. And look at that. That is like, you know, like a regular pen. And all I know about this book is that it's an Alice in Wonderland retelling, and this isn't actually about Alice. It's about Alice's friend. And so it's about Alice's friend, Ada, like comes to visit Alice, but she gets there after Alice has already tumbled down the rabbit hole, and then she tumbles down the rabbit hole herself. And that's all I know. But I really, really like this cover because, like, this jacket, it's like, you know, it's like this. And then underneath, you have, like, what looks like some kind of map. And I just think that's really interesting. And that is why I wanted the hardcover of this book, because that's unique. So, yeah. And then the last Gregory Mcguire book I picked up is Lost. And I think this is like a Christmas Carol kind of retelling. And that's all I know about it. It has something to do with a Christmas Carol. And so there are ghosts and... oh, that's creepy. And it doesn't have to do with Ebenezer Scrooge. I don't know if someone moved into the house that he used to live in. But yeah, I think it has something to do with either somebody is related to the person who is the inspiration for Ebenezer Scrooge or something along those lines. But it's kind of like a Christmas story. And it sounds like it has ghosts in it, and it's creepy, and it looks like it's going to be a little creepy. And yeah. So next I got The Queens of Innisleer by Tessa Gratton, and this is the book I got from Book Depository because I wanted the UK paperback because I just really like vines and flowers and stuff, and I just thought this cover was so gorgeous, and I really wanted this book, and I would not accept any other cover except for this one. So yeah, but this is a like King Lear kind of inspired book, and it's about his daughters. And I heard this book is like it's not very action-packed, but it's like very atmospheric, and it's like really interesting. So I'm really looking forward to this. But yeah, I think he has like 3 daughters because the back says battle-hungry Gala, master manipulator Reagan, restrained star-blessed Elia, the queens of Innisleer. And I'm kind of been debating whether or not I want to read King Lear before I read this, or if I'm just going to read this. I don't know. But I really wanted to read this because it sounds like it's really atmospheric and dark, and that there are characters who are like kind of sketchy. You don't know who to trust, and yeah. So the next book I have is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, and I wasn't going to pick this up yet because I haven't read Uprooted yet, but Uprooted is on my November TBR, and I wanted to get it, so I went ahead and got it. So this is like, I think it's listed as a coming-of-age fantasy. This girl, they go to this magic school, but there are no teachers, and there are monsters, and like you can literally die like trying to go to the bathroom. And yeah, I don't know. I wanted to get it because I feel like she's an author that I will really like. So, and that's all I know about this book. Is it's about this girl, and she's trying not to die at this magic school. And I really like this end paper. I think it's like a layout of like kind of like what the school looks like, and it might be like a more useful map than like most of the maps, because most of the time they're like, here's a map of the land, and I'm like, oh, know where this is. I mean, it's pretty, but I think this is like the actual like school, so it looks interesting. And then we just have our classic black and gold naked hardcover. And also, I really love this gold spine on this book. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about are all by Alice Hoffman, and that is Practical Magic, The Rules of Magic, and the newest book that just came out, Magic Lessons. And I wasn't going to get this yet, but I wanted to get it, so I went ahead and got it. So I'm going to talk about them in the order that they came out. Even though this is like the modern day version of the story, and then this story takes place before this story, and then this place takes story before both of these stories. So if you're unfamiliar, Practical Magic is about these sisters, and there's a curse on the family that if any of them fall in love, then the person that they love will die. And so, like, I don't know how long it takes. I don't know if it's like 5 years or if it's 3 years, but one day they will wake up, they will hear like basically a death rattle, and then like the next day their loved one will die. So the first sister, she fell in love, got married, had a couple kids, and then she heard the death rattle and her husband died. And then the other sister, she's lived a very wild life, and she gets in trouble, and she comes home, and she's like, oh my gosh, can you help me? And so they work together to fix the problem that the younger wild sister has created, and in doing so, they break the curse that's been on the family for hundreds of years. And so in the Rules of Magic, the ants that are in the Practical Magic, this is when they were younger, and I don't know much else about the story outside of that, other than there's someone in the story that like is in Practical Magic. And so I'm thinking I'm going to read them in order from newest to oldest, meaning that I'll read the newest prequel first, and then this one, and then Practical Magic. But anyway, so yeah, that's all I know about this one, is the ants that are in Practical Magic are in this book, and yeah. And then in this book, this is about the witch in the family who created the curse that's on the family. And so she falls in love, something tragic happens, and she puts a curse on the family. And so this is about the woman who started it all. And so I was interested in reading this. And then underneath the desk jacket, we have our classic black and gold. Also, there are deckled edges for this book. So the next 5 books I have are all in the Wayward Children series by Sean Mcguire, and that is Every Heart a Doorway, Down Among the Sticks and Bones, Beneath the Sugar Sky, and An Absent Dream. Boy, I love that. And Come Tumbling Down. And I was only going to get a couple of them. I was going to get Every Heart a Doorway and An Absent Dream, but when I was looking at the description, it says it wraps up loose ends that are in Down Among the Sticks of Bones and Every Heart a Doorway. So then I was like, okay, well, let me get that one. And then I was like, well, I might as well get these other 2. And the one coming out in January has like unicorns in it, I think. And I really want that book. So I have Every Heart a Doorway on my November TBR. So, and hopefully I will love it so that I can get the newest novella book when it comes out. So these are all about like these I think they're mostly children, but I don't think they're all children. But like basically when they were children, they went through this portal into another world. And when they came back into this world, they had a really hard time adjusting. And so there's this school that was built to help people transition back into the real world after they've been in a portal world. And it sounds like it's right up my alley, and they sound like they're really good. Plus they're really short. And yeah, so I got all of these. So I'm only going to show you underneath one of the desk jackets since they all look the same except the naked hardcover is just like a different color. So they all have these like what looks like kind of like a spaceship on the front, and then different colors but pretty foiling on the spine. Also, I really like books that have lightning on the cover. So the next book I'm going to talk about is also a novella, and that is The Deep by River Solomon. And so when I was talking about The Deep by Amakatsu earlier, what was really funny is that I originally was going to get The Deep from Barnes & Noble, The Deep by Amakatsu, and apparently they were out of that book, and this book got pulled by accident. And so when they handed me this book, I was like, this is not the right book, because the book I got, was thick and darker, and this is smaller and lighter and has a mermaid on the cover, but then I got to looking at the book, and so I looked it up, and there are mermaids in this book, and it's not really something I feel like I would normally pick up, but I couldn't help myself. So this is basically about the offspring of pregnant slave women who were thrown overboard. In this story, the babies survived and they turned into mermaids. And because their past is so traumatic, they designated someone to be like the memory keeper. And so like that person like keeps all the memory and all the history of these mer people so that they can just live unburdened and happy and swimming around in the ocean. And then like once a year, this person is allowed to unburden themselves of all the memory and share them with everyone. And so they all experience, their past together. And then at the end of the day, the memory keeper takes everything back and they have to carry that burden alone. And I think she like gets overwhelmed, and so she goes up to land to like try to escape everything. And I think it's like, it sounds like it's a really beautiful story and also kind of a fantastical story. And this is what our hardcover looks like. And yeah. The last book I'm going to talk about is another book that I'm a little extra excited about, and that is Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. Also, this cover is gorgeous. And we have deckled edges. And so this book is about an academy, and it's like this really elite school. And when you graduate, you're basically guaranteed to succeed in life. So whatever you want, if you want to be a famous artist, if you want to be president, if you want to be whatever you want, you're guaranteed if you go to the school and graduate. But apparently this school has some dark secrets, and I saw somebody like talk about reading this book and they said it left them feeling crazy. So I'm really excited because I like that. And I hear it's like kind of another like maybe slower paced book, but it's like really atmospheric and it's kind of haunting, and yeah. So those are all the books for this video, and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought about them, if you found a new book, and yeah. So I will get all my books put back on the shelf, and I will see you guys in the next video. That is all for this one, and hopefully this video won't end up being too long because, oh my gosh, it's so long. But also, I didn't say, in case anyone was wondering, there were 55 books, I think, in this haul, if I counted right, which who knows. So that will conclude my book hauls for the year, and yeah. So I hope you guys are having a good November so far, and I will see you in the next video, and yeah, bye.